Maya Johnson woke before the sun touched the sky. She slipped out of bed in her small room, careful not to wake her little brother, Caleb. The lamp on her desk still glowed softly, casting shadows on the photos tacked to the wall. One showed her mother's bright smile, another captured Maya and Caleb sharing ice cream on a hot day. Maya touched the pictures gently as if drawing courage from those happy moments. She dressed in her simple café uniforme, neat polo and black apron, then packed her notebook and a sandwich she had made the night before, leaned down to kiss Caleb's forehead and whispered, "I'll be back soon," before slipping out the door and locking it behind her. The streets were quiet as Maya walked to the cafe. The air felt cool and a faint breeze rustled through the trees lining the block. She liked these early hours when the city was still waking up. She could think clearly, free from noise and crowds. On her way, she passed the corner store where the owner, Mr. Salam, was unloading fresh bread. He waved at her, and Maya returned a small smile. She greeted Mrs. Turner, who sat on her porch, knitting. "Morning, Maya," the old woman called. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. She loved the familiarity of these moment-simple acts that reminded her she belonged somewhere. When Maya arrived at the cafe, she turned the key and flicked on the lights. The smell of coffee beans greeted her like an old friend. She checked the cash drawer, wiped the counter, and set out clean cups on the shelf. Behind the counter, she arranged the pastries, muffins, croissants, and a tray of cinnamon rolls that still steamed from the oven. She arranged each item carefully, lining them in neat rows. Then she took out her notebook to review her class notes for a moment. Community college classes started in an hour. She hoped to finish her shift quickly so she could still make it to campus on time. Maya balanced her work and studies as best she could. After her mother died, she took on extra hours at the cafe to cover rent and food for her brother. Every paycheck meant another week with a roof over their heads. She did not mind the effort, though. She believed hard work built character, and she hoped Caleb would learn from her example. She closed her notebook and tucked it safely into her bag. It was almost time for the morning rush. Local commuters, grabbing breakfast and that first cup of coffee. Maya took a deep breath, smoothed her apron, and prepared to welcome the first customers. Across town, Julian Sinclair pulled his car into the cafe's small parking lot. His reflection caught in the windshield showed a man in his early 40s with neat hair and a tailored suit. He had built his tech company from nothing, working late nights and skipping family events. Now he was successful beyond his wildest dreams, but something felt missing. He glanced at his watch, 6:45 a.m., and reminded himself to work on a new project proposal after his coffee. He valued efficiency, but he also knew a good cup of coffee helped him think. He stepped out of his car, adjusted his tie, and walked toward the cafe doors. Inside, the cafe hummed with activity as the first customers lined up. Maya gave each person a friendly nod and quick smile. She greeted Mr. Patel, who ordered 2 black coffees and a bagel, and Mrs. Green, who asked for her usual latte with almond milk. She moved swiftly, knowing every second counted during the morning rush. When she saw Julian enter, she took a moment to study him. He carried himself with quiet confidence, yet his eyes hinted at tiredness. His smile was polite but reserved, and his suit looked expensive. Maya wondered what kind of life he led to need such strong coffee so early. Julian stepped up to the counter and cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said, in a measured voice. "I'll have a latte, please." Maya punched the order into the register. She could hear the espresso machine steaming in the back, the hiss of hot water, the soft clink of cups. She moved to prepare his latte, steaming the milk to a smooth, velvety foam. As she worked, she glanced at him in the mirror behind the espresso machine, typed a quick message on his phone, eyebrows furrowed. She felt a spark of curiosity. Who was this man with his serious gaze and quick movements? Just as Maya finished frothing the milk, something went wrong with the register. The screen froze, and the drawer would not open. She tapped the buttons, but the machine stayed silent. The queue behind Julian grew longer. Maya's heart raced. She gave him an apologetic look. "I'm so sorry. The till is acting up." Set his latte cup on the counter and offered, "Here, let me pay for it now." Maya shook her head quickly. No, I'll cover it, she said, reaching for her own wallet. She pulled out 2 small bills. On me today. Julian raised his eyebrows in surprise. Maya felt her cheeks warm as she handed Julian the bills. She cleared the frozen order from her screen and took the cash to put in her apron pocket. Then, she rang up his latte again on a handheld register she kept for emergencies. She passed the cup forward. Soft milk foam swirled on top, a gentle hint of caramel around the rim. Julian accepted it with a small, genuine smile.
Thank you,
he said. His voice sounded warmer. He took a sip and closed his eyes as if savoring something precious. Maya dared to hope she had brightened his morning. As Julian walked away to find a seat, Maya watched him choose a small table by the window.
Oh.
He seemed relaxed now, eyes softer as he took another drink. She returned to her station, her pulse steadying. Customers continued to come in, teachers, parents, delivery drivers, all nodding as Maya greeted them. But her mind drifted back to that moment with Julian. Something in his expression caught her heart a flicker of surprise, of gratitude. She wondered about the story behind his tired eyes and expensive suit. Without knowing why, she felt connected to this stranger who had unknowingly shared a small act of kindness with her. When the rush ended, Maya stole a moment to breathe. She leaned against the counter and wiped her forehead with a clean towel. She thought about her lifelong mornings, late nights studying, the responsibility of caring for Caleb. She felt both tired and proud. Every day she worked hard because she believed in hope, in the promise that small acts could change lives. She glanced toward Julian, who was leaving a small tip on the table and heading for the door. Their eyes met for an instant. He gave her a nod, and Maya returned it with a steady smile. It was a small exchange, but in that shared look, something shifted. As Julian walked out, Maya felt a strange flutter in her chest. She returned to arranging pastries and restocking napkins, but her thoughts remained with him. She wondered if she would ever see him again. She thought of her dreams finishing college, finding a steady job, giving Caleb a life full of love and support. She reminded herself to stay focused. Yet she could not ignore the sense that this morning was different. Lives had touched. Neither of them knew how deeply, but both would carry the memory forward into the day ahead. Maya returned the next morning with a spring in her step. She wore her apron as usual and unlocked the cafe before dawn. The familiar hiss of the espresso machine felt like home. She placed a fresh batch of muffins on display and straightened the sugar packets. Her mind wandered to yesterday's moment with Julian Sinclair, the way his eyes softened when she paid for his latte. It gave her hope that a small act could spark something warm in a stranger's day. She smiled at the thought and tucked a loose curl behind her ear as the first customers began to shuffle in. Julian slipped in as regular as clockwork 5 minutes before 7. His tailored suit looked crisp in the soft light, and his shoes tapped lightly on the tile floor. Maya greeted him without hesitation now, as though she expected him. "Good morning," she said, and his face lit up with a genuine smile. He ordered his latte the same as before and lingered by the counter instead of hurrying out. Maya felt a thrill in her chest. It surprised her how connected she felt to this man she barely knew. She handed over his drink and watched him close his eyes for a moment to savor it. Then she asked, gentle but curious, "Did you like it?" He met her gaze. "It's perfect," he said. "Exactly what I needed." His gratitude felt sincere. Maya said, "I'm glad." She moved on to serve other customers but kept glancing at him. When the rush slowed, she wiped the counter and said, "You're here a lot this week." Julian nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I find it helps me think, and your smile helps me start the day right." Over the next few days, their exchanges grew. Julian told Maya he was working on a big presentation and needed clarity of mind. Maya listened attentively, offering quiet encouragement. She spoke of her classes at community college and how she dreamed of being a nurse. He asked questions, genuinely interested in her story. She told him about her little brother Caleb, how she juggled work and school to care for him. He looked surprised at her strength and dedication. Maya felt proud to share her burden and grateful that Julian cared. One morning, Maya's coworker, Rosa, teased her as Maya handed Julian his latte. "He looks like $1,000,000, Rosa teased, nodding at Julian's tailored suit.
Us.
Maya smiled but didn't respond. Later, Rosa showed Maya photos on her phone family, snapshots from a reunion. In one picture stood a tall man with the same strong jaw and serious eyes that Julian had. He wore a suit in that photo too. Maya's heart skipped, but she laughed it off. "Stop teasing me," she said, though a curious knot formed in her chest. Julian began to arrive earlier each day, sometimes even before the cafe opened. Noticed he grew more relaxed in her presence. He brought his laptop and pored over slides while she set out fresh pastries. Sometimes she joined him on a stool and they shared a quiet moment over coffee. He told her about his childhood, how he lost his mother young, how he thought money could fill the emptiness, but found it could not. Maya listened, amazed at his candor. She felt honored that he trusted her with such private memories. One afternoon, a sudden downpour trapped customers inside. Maya rushed to close the door and handed out napkins to wipe wet umbrellas. Julian offered to help, grabbing a stack of dishes from the counter. Maya watched him carry plates as if he did it every day. His strength surprised her. When he returned the empty dishes, he grinned. "I should chip in more often," he said. Maya laughed and replied, "Any help is welcome." They worked side by side like old friends. The rain drummed on the windows, and inside the cafe, warmth grew between them. As the week wore on, Maya caught sight of a faint birthmark on Julian's wrist, a small cluster of freckles in an unusual shape. That mark matched the one her late mother had drawn in a letter saying her own father had a similar mark. Maya's breath caught. She studied his hand each morning, wondering if fate had guided her to this man. Yet she held her tongue. She feared the truth might upset their fragile bond. She decided to wait, to learn more before risking what they had begun. Julian, too, felt the pull of something deeper. He noticed Maya's steady gaze when she thought he wasn't looking. He felt a tenderness he had never allowed himself to feel. He wanted to ask her where she came from, who her family was, but he held back, hid behind gentle smiles and polite conversation. He was torn between the urge to protect his heart and the need to know her story. Each morning he left the cafe with a curious ache he could not name. One busy Saturday, Maya's shift ran long. She wiped down tables, cleared crumbs, and restocked napkins until her shoulders ached. Only then did Julian approach. He had stayed behind, feeding coins into the parking meter so she wouldn't be late. He watched her work, concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked. Maya paused and leaned against the counter. She managed a tired smile. "Just another long day," she said. Julian offered to drive her home, but Maya shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm all right. Caleb waits for me." He nodded, though he looked disappointed. That evening, Maya walked home under a golden sunset. She carried her bag of school books and thought about Julian's kindness. He had no reason to care about her, a stranger who worked at a cafe. Yet he did. She felt both grateful and unsettled by how much she looked forward to seeing him. She wondered if a successful man like him could ever fit into her simple world. She reminded herself that life was unpredictable, and sometimes magic lived in small gestures of free latte, a shared smile, a listening ear. The next morning, Maya arrived early and found Julian already at his usual table. He looked up and waved. She returned the wave and served him his latte. This time, he said, "I tried something new." Maya tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He handed her a small notepad. Inside, he had sketched a simple chart of his company's growth and obstacles. He asked her opinion. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. She was no business expert, but she recognized his genuine need for honest feedback. She studied the chart and offered her thoughts, her voice steady with confidence. Julian listened intently as Maya pointed out areas where he might reach out to local partners, tapping into community resources to strengthen his plan. She spoke of her work at the cafe, how small businesses thrived on local support and word of mouth. He nodded, impressed by her insight. When she finished, he closed the notepad and smiled. You've opened my eyes, he said. I think I have a better direction now. Maya felt the thrill her words had mattered to him. She realized then that respect and understanding could bridge any divide. They sat together for a few quiet minutes, drinking coffee and watching the morning unfold. The sun streamed through the windows, painting everything gold. Maya thought about her mother's advice. Kindness costs little, but gives much. Julian thought about his own father, whom he never met, and how he had always regretted passing up chances to connect. In that moment, both felt a gentle nudge of fate, guiding them towards something neither could yet name. When Julian finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. He turned to Maya and said, "Thank you for everything." Maya smiled softly. "Thank you for trusting me." He nodded and stepped into the bright morning, leaving Maya with a flutter in her heart and a sense that their story was only beginning. As she watched him go, she held on to the hope that kindness and connection could change not just one day, but both of their lives forever. Maya arrived at the cafe before sunrise once again. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, letting the soft glow of the lights push back the darkness. She set her bag on the chair by the counter and took a deep breath of the warm air, rich with coffee and pastries. She arranged the croissants in neat rows and brushed a few crumbs away from the glass display. Her heart felt light, even though her body still ached from the late-night study session. She loved these quiet moments when she could prepare for the day in peace. When she turned around, she saw Julian already seated at his usual table. He looked up from his newspaper and waved. Maya smiled and carried his latte toward him. As she handed him the cup, her eyes drifted down to his wrist. There, just above the cuff of his shirt, was the faint birthmark she had noticed before, a small cluster of freckles in a shape she recognized from her mother's old letters. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She forced her gaze upward and said, "Good morning." Her voice sounded calmer than she felt. Julian looked at her kindly, as if he sensed her attention. He tucked his sleeve down and studied her face. "Morning," he said softly. "Thank you for the coffee." Maya nodded, her heart pounding. She walked back to the counter without another word, trying to steady her breathing. In her mind, she replayed every memory her mother had shared about her father, the kindness in his eyes, the gentle way he held her mother's hand, and that tiny birthmark on his wrist. Was it possible this man was the same one her mother had written about? The day passed in a blur of orders and greeting regulars. Rosa, Maya's coworker, chatted about weekend plans and spilled coffee beans on the floor. Maya nearly missed a refill for a customer because her thoughts kept drifting to Julian's wrist.
Ow!
She wiped the counter twice, as if the simple act could clear her mind. When the rush died down, she found herself standing beside the espresso machine, staring at the countertop as if answers would appear in the marble veins. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. A hush fell over the cafe. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She fumbled for her phone to turn on the flashlight, then realized she had candles in the back room for emergencies. She dashed to fetch them, her steps echoing in the darkened space. Julian stood up and helped her carry the small candles and matches to the counter. Together, they placed them in the holders that Maya kept neatly stacked. Soft pools of light glowed where the candles stood. Shadows danced on the walls, and the cafe felt warm and intimate in the dim glow. Customers murmured quietly, surprised by the sudden change. As the hiss of the espresso machine stopped, and the usual buzz of the cafe gave way to a gentle stillness. Maya and Julian sat side by side at the counter, their faces lit by the candles. Outside, the city lights flickered on, but inside, their world felt small and safe.
Oh.
Julian spoke first. "I'm sorry about the power," he said. His voice sounded close, soft. Maya shook her head. "It's okay. It's kinda nice." She smiled at him, and he returned it, his eyes bright in the candlelight. They talked about the power company, about how sometimes small things break and remind us of bigger truths. Maya listened, drawn in by his calm tone. She felt a connection she could not name, as though they shared something deeper than a few breakfasts together. She asked him gently, "Do you ever feel like you work so hard you forget why you do it?" Julian looked down at his hands. The time he admitted, "No, I used to think success was all that mattered. Now I wonder if it's just a way to fill a hole inside." Maya nodded, understanding deeply. She told him about her mother and how her mother had taught her the value of caring for others. She spoke of her brother Caleb and how his bright smile kept her going, even when life felt heavy. Julian listened without interrupting. Each time Maya paused, he looked at her with respect and warmth. In that moment, she felt seen and heard in a way she rarely did. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She realized that Julian's success had come at a cost, the cost of losing small moments like this one. And yet here he was, sharing his story with a young woman who simply wanted to help her family. Maya felt her walls come down a little more, revealing the hopes and dreams she kept hidden. As the candlelight flickered, Maya's gaze drifted to Julian's wrist again. The birthmark was there, shining in the soft glow. She remembered how her mother described that mark in a letter, a mark that proved her father was real, that he had loved her mother before life pulled them apart.
Maya felt tears prick at the edges of her eyes.
She wanted to ask him, to say, "Do you have a daughter?" But pride and fear held her back. She was afraid of what might happen if she asked, and he denied it. She could not risk losing this new friendship. Julian cleared his throat and reached for his coffee. He watched Maya with quiet curiosity, as if he sensed her questions. He wanted to ask her where she came from, what her family was like, but he stopped himself. He was afraid that pushing too hard would drive her away. He cared about her laughter, her kindness, the way she believed in simple joys. He did not want to scare her off by asking too many questions. So he stayed silent, letting the moment slip away. When the lights came back on, the cafe returned to its usual brightness and sound. Maya and Julian blinked, adjusting to the change. They helped extinguish the candles and set them back in the emergency box. Customers clapped softly, relieved to see the lights again. Maya took a deep breath and looked at Julian. "Thank you for helping," she said. He smiled and said, "Thank you for making this place feel like home." There was an unspoken warmth between them, a gentle understanding that neither quite named. Later, when Maya closed up the cafe for the night, she found herself lingering by the door. She turned back to the empty tables and the soft glow of the now dark cafe. She thought of the birthmark of her mother's letters and of Julian's kind eyes. She wondered if some chance of fate had brought them together. She touched her wrist. There was no birthmark there, but her heart felt connected to something bigger than her own life. Julian left the cafe that night under a sky full of stars. He paused at the entrance and looked back at the warm lights inside. He felt a mix of hope and fear. He had glimpsed something in Maya's eyes, a light he remembered from his own childhood, a sense of belonging he had almost forgotten. He wanted to reach out, to ask her about her family, to share more of himself, but he knew he had to be patient. Trust had to grow slowly, like a plant needing time to take root. Both Maya and Julian carried the memory of that candlelit hour with them. Maya went home to Toby, her small dog, who greeted her with a wagging tail, the worry in her heart easing as she thought of the friendship she had found. Julian returned to his empty apartment, the tall glass windows overlooking the city, and felt something shift inside him, a quiet longing for more than work. They both lay awake that night, thinking of each other, caught between hope and fear, wondering if one day they would ask the questions they dared not speak. In the days that followed, they continued their quiet routine. Maya served coffee with her gentle smile. Julian drank it with thoughtful sips. They shared jokes, small observations, and occasional advice. Yet the unspoken questions lingered, like shadows in the corners of their mornings. Neither asked the other name or story of family, and neither moved on from that soft moment of candlelight where two lives had touched something deeper than coffee. They carried that spark forward, fragile, unspoken, and full of promise. Maya stepped into the cafe before the sun rose that morning, just as she did every day. She flipped the lock and turned on the lights, watching the room fill with a soft glow. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and she arranged the pastries. Without thinking too hard about each action, her mind was busy with thoughts of Julian Sinclair. She wondered if he would show up early as he had lately, and if their quiet talks would continue. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves whenever she thought of him. Moments later, Julian slipped in through the door. He gave her a small, warm smile as she handed him his latte. She noticed right away how his eyes lingered on hers, as if he had something important on his mind. Maya set his drink down carefully and asked, in her gentle voice, "Is everything all right?" Julian nodded, but he did not speak. Instead, he slipped a folded piece of paper into his suit pocket and walked toward his favorite seat by the window. Maya watched him go, her heart picking up speed. Later that day, Julian sat in his lavish office, the walls lined with awards and framed photos of his tech ventures. His assistant Grace stepped in quietly, holding a tablet. She said, "Sir, the charity group we plan to support has a contact named Maya Johnson. They think she might help them reach the inner-city market." Julian's breath caught. You remember the name Johnson, Maya Johnson, the young woman at the cafe. His mind raced as Grace spoke on, unaware of what she had triggered. Grace continued, "She is very active in her community college, and she works at a local cafe to support her brother. I thought you might like to meet her officially, perhaps at our next event." Julian's face grew pale. He closed his eyes for a moment and pictured Maya's kind smile, her gentle strength. He thought of the birthmark on her arm, the one he knew from long ago. His heart pounded, thanked Grace and asked her to set up a meeting for next week. Once she left, he stared at the tablet screen as if it held the answer to a question he dared not ask. That evening, Julian called a doctor he trusted and asked for a simple health screening. He explained it was routine for executives in his company. The doctor agreed and scheduled a private appointment in a few days. When the date came, Julian arrived at a small lab under the guise of a wellness check. A nurse took his blood sample without a second glance. All the while, Julian tried to stay calm. But inside, he trembled. He thought of Maya's smile and the story his late partner wrote about a daughter she never got to meet. He wondered if this test could finally tell him if Maya was that daughter. While Julian waited for his results, Maya spent her evening at home sifting through her mother's letters. She had kept them in a box under her bed for years, reading them only when she missed her mother most. Tonight, she sat at her small desk, reading by the light of a single lamp. Her mother had written about a man with gentle eyes and a kind heart, a man who had promised to return when our child was old enough to know me. In one letter, her mother sketched a small cluster of freckles on his wrist and wrote, "It's the mark I will always remember." Maya's breath caught. She traced the drawing with her finger, remembering the faint freckle she had once thought was nothing more than a tiny birthmark. Tears filled Maya's eyes as she read on. Her mother had written about feeling safe beside him, about imagining the day their child would meet her father. Maya closed her eyes and thought of the man who had sat at her cafe table, a man with quiet confidence, who asked about her dreams and listened closely to her words. Could this stranger be the man her mother loved? Maya shook her head, unsure if she dared to hope. She folded the letters carefully and tucked them back into the box, her heart heavy with longing and fear. Days passed, and Julian's test results arrived. He opened the sealed envelope on a quiet afternoon in his office. His hands shook as he read the words. The test confirmed what he had dared to believe. The DNA match was almost certain, 99.9% probability, that Maya was his daughter. Julian closed the envelope and leaned back in his leather chair. His chest tightened with shock and relief. All at once, he felt joy, guilt, and a fierce longing to reach out to her. He thought of the mornings they had shared, the way she served him coffee, the way they talked about their hopes. He remembered the flicker of recognition in her eyes when she saw his wrist, and the silence that followed. Now he knew why she had hesitated. Now he understood the bond she felt. Julian stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had to tell Maya the truth, but he did not know how. Promised himself he would protect her dreams, not shatter them. As Julian prepared to leave his office, he paused by a framed photo of his late partner, smiling in a garden. He whispered, "I will do right by you both." He pocketed the DNA. report, and headed for the door. Back at the cafe the next morning, Maya unlocked the door and felt a strange mix of hope and unease. She did not know that Julian held the answer to her deepest question. She only knew that something had shifted between them, as if fate had drawn an invisible line ready to be crossed. And somewhere deep inside, both of them felt that their lives were about to change forever. Julian stood at the entrance of the new community center early in the morning, watching the soft light of dawn touch the building's pale walls. He checked his watch and took a steadying breath. Today was the day he would finally tell Maya the truth. He smoothed his suit jacket and stepped inside, where the empty hall smelled of fresh paint and quiet promise. He walked down the wide corridor past rooms labeled Learning Lab and Meeting Space. His heart pounded as he thought of her gentle smile and the secret they both carried. A few minutes later, Maya arrived, her arms holding a stack of flyers for the center's grand opening. She had no idea why Julian had asked her here before. The doors officially opened. She found him in the main hall, adjusting a row of chairs. When she saw him, her own heart fluttered. She smiled and said, "Good morning, Mr. Sinclair." Julian shook his head, his eyes warm.
Please, call me
"Julian," he said. Maya blinked, surprised by his use of his first name. She set the flyers on a table and watched him with gentle curiosity. They walked together through the center, Julian pointing out details, the low shelves in the reading corner, the bright colors on the walls, the comfortable chairs in the lounge. Maya admired the way he had thought of every need, from a small play area for children to a quiet room for study. As they passed the glass doors leading outside, Julian stopped. He turned to her and said, "I wanted to show you something behind these doors." He led her through the doors into a small office he had kept closed. Inside, the office was quiet and private. On the desk lay a leather-bound journal, old and worn, and beside it a small wooden box. Maya's gaze moved between the objects. She said softly, "What is this place?" Julian closed the door behind them and took a seat at the desk. He patted the chair across from him. Maya sat, her hands resting on her lap. She noticed the box and the journal. "Are those your things?" she asked. Julian nodded and said, "They belong to someone I loved very much." He opened the wooden box and gently lifted out a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. The paper was yellowed at the edges. He placed them on the desk in front of Maya. "My partner, your mother, wrote these letters before she died." He said. Maya's breath caught. She leaned forward, her eyes wide. She recognized the ribbon from her own box at home. "These are my mother's letters," she whispered. Julian nodded, voice soft. "She asked me to keep them safe until the day I met our child." Maya's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the letters. She felt tears spring to her eyes. "Child," she repeated, voice shaking. Julian took a deep breath and said, "Maya, I am sorry. I did not know sooner. I did not know you existed until recently." Maya swallowed hard, her heart heavy and full at once. She said, "I read these letters at home. I have them." Her voice cracked slightly. Julian looked at her with gentle sorrow. "I had a test. Done. The results show we are father and daughter." Silence filled the room. Maya closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. She thought of every moment they had shared, the morning coffees, the quiet talks, the candlelit conversation. She remembered the birthmark on his wrist and her own hope that he might be her father. Now she knew it was true. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Julian stood and came around the desk. He knelt beside her chair and took her hand in his. She felt his warm palm cover hers. "I am so sorry I missed all those years," Julian said, voice thick with emotion. "I wish I had known you sooner." Maya looked up at him, eyes shining. She saw the sorrow in his face and the love shining behind it. She said, "I wish that too." They sat together in stillness, letting the truth wash over them. Maya's tears fell quietly, and Julian wiped them gently with his thumb. It was a simple act, full of meaning. Father and daughter finally connected. After a moment, Maya stood and stepped into Julian's arms. He held her, his cheek resting against her hair. She felt safe there, a warmth she had never known. The world outside the small office faded away. For the first time in her life, she had a father who cared enough to search for her. They stayed like that until Maya's tears slowed and her breathing steadied. When they finally pulled apart, Julian held her shoulders and looked into her eyes. "I want to make up for lost time," he said softly. "If you will let me." Maya nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "I want that too," she said. Julian helped her gather her things, including the letters and the journal. He said, "Come sit with me for a moment." They walked to a window overlooking the parking lot. The sun had climbed higher, casting a bright glow over the empty seats. Julian opened the journal and showed Maya the first page, a note his partner had written to him when their child was born. It spoke of hope and promised reunion. Maya read the words aloud, her voice steady and clear. Together they sat and read, sharing stories from the past. Maya told Julian about her mother's laughter, the songs she sang, and the dreams she had for her children. Julian told Maya about his own memories, snapshots of his life before dreams of business had taken over. He spoke of the portrait of her mother in his mind, kind eyes, gentle voice, and the love between them. Maya listened, her heart full. She realized that the family she had imagined in her dreams was now real. When they finished, Julian reached out and held Maya's hand. "Would you like to meet Caleb?" he asked. Maya's smile shone like the morning sun. "I would love that," she said. Julian nodded and led her out of the office. As they walked down the corridor, they passed the tables set for the opening ceremony. Chairs lined up, balloons tied to posts, trays of snacks waiting on tables. The community center was ready to welcome its guests. And so were they, ready to step into their new life together. At the grand opening later that morning, the hall was filled with neighbors and friends. Maya stood beside Julian and introduced him to her brother Caleb, who held her hand shyly. Caleb's eyes widened when he met Julian and saw the kindness in his smile. Maya watched as her father and brother exchanged nervous hellos, then laughter. As they found common jokes, she felt joy bloom in her chest, a bright feeling she knew would stay with her forever. Julian spoke at the ceremony, thanking the community and naming Maya and Caleb as his inspiration. He said, "This center is for every family searching for